Could we get everyone back down to their chairs and then we'll get cracking with the afternoon session. Hope everyone's had enough lunch. Feel free to, like I said, bring some back to the chair, keep you going through the afternoon. Fantastic. Well, I think we've had a great morning, and we have one more session this afternoon, which I know is going to be equally interesting as the ones that we've done already. And this session is all around exploring succession and diversification, succession planning and diversification of farming. And so if I could invite the panelists up to the stage, and then we'll get started and I will do the introductions. Very good. Good. We all mic'd up?
Hopefully.
All relaxed?
Yeah.
You've got the tough gig now. You've got to get them all going again after lunch, basically. So I would like to introduce, and I'm delighted to have here on the panel, Tom Curran, many of you will know, Head of Advisory Services with Teagasc. We have a young man there, Declan Collins, who I know well from being a very worthy finalist in the recent Southern Star West Cork Farming Awards. You're very welcome. On the end, we have Amy Dunphy, who is a UCC/Moore Park Agri student. And I should also say that Declan is also a UCC Moore Park Agri student. And Neil Collins here, a farmer, Declan's father. So we should get some very interesting perspectives here from the both of you. Great to have you all on board, and thank you for your time today. What I'd like us to explore is the topic and the theme around what can we do to attract and retain more young people into farming, into agriculture as a viable career and lifestyle, especially as I think I'm right in saying, and Tom, you might correct me on this if I'm not, but that the profile of farmers a wee bit in terms of the age demographic is a little bit on the aging side. So it's very important that we're bringing in young blood and fresh blood into the industry. And I just thought what we'll do, we'll just see how the conversation goes, but we'll explore around points like successful succession planning, how that can make a big difference, and the difference between succession planning and inheritance. They are different things, and I think there might be some interesting views that you can bring to us there. How diversification, we touched on it in the session this morning, how diversification of income streams on a farm can help farmers, especially younger farmers with future viability. Possibly anything around different models of farming that might exist for new generations coming into the industry. And also any particular advice around which kind of professionals and advisors. We talked a lot earlier about startups and entrepreneurs and mentors and funding, etc. But for young farmers, for farmers who may be in that succession planning or the asset transfer point of their cycle, what kind of professionals and advisors are out there to help farmers and how they should approach that? So I think it's interesting. We've got views from the younger generation at the end, and no disrespect to the lads in the middle and myself. We're sort of holding up the, what should we say, the middle-aged side of things. So Tom, you and your colleagues at Teagasc, you've got a lot of experience, obviously, working with farmers and farming families. Might I get the ball rolling by asking you to share some key points or thoughts for consideration for farmers who want to build a successful land and farm succession plan, and especially around this kind of topic that you'd mentioned to me before about this sort of gradual and constant generational succession?
Yeah, so I suppose, first of all, the average age of farmers is between 55 and 60, and roughly about 4 to 5% based on the last National Farm Survey data, of farmers under 35. So a lot of it is how do we make farming an attractive career, and a lot of that is dependent on, the enterprise like dairying at the moment is very buoyant. But that's not to say, I suppose, in my experience, that the presence or absence of a successor is not necessarily enterprise based. Some of the top farms in the country, you'd look at farms with maybe 150, 200 cows and great setups, and there's no farming successor there either. So it's not a viability thing as such. But I suppose they're the stats in it. You mentioned succession and inheritance, and you know, people always assume gravitate towards the farm transfer when they talk about succession. But if you think about it, you know, why did Amy and Declan choose agriculture? Why did I choose agriculture as a career? Or why did Neil do it? Or any farmer? And I suppose in my own case, I can just say that my dad was the babysitter. I come from a family of 10, so he was the babysitter, and our playground was the farmyard. And, you know, we basically grew up on the farm, and that's where my interest in farming. As we got older, we learned to do jobs. We got handy around the farm and as labor, and you know, that's where the interest develops from. And I think something, if you look at modern farming now, it's very busy, and you always have to be cognizant of health and safety as well, obviously for young kids on farms. But it's that integration. Like I meet a lot of farmers, and they say I've no farming successor, but if you wait till your kids at 35 and you want to transfer the farm to them, well, how are they going to suddenly develop an interest in farming at that stage? You know, so I think, you know, and it came up at the KT conference in Dublin yesterday, you know, both girls and boys, and treating them equally, and not necessarily getting the girls to feed the calves and the boys to drive the tractor, or, you know, that it's kind of, you know, it's involving your children in it, so that they may develop an interest in it. But I suppose the point I would like to make on that is, I think a lot of farmers assume that they have to have a full grey hair or no hair at all before they consider succession, you know, and it starts much earlier than that. Where does the interest in farming and in animals and you know, the landscape, where does that come from? And it comes really from much earlier in life. But if you don't involve your family early in life, then they probably won't develop that you know, interest in it. So I think what I would say, farmers in the prime of their career, every farmer is on that succession ladder somewhere. You know, they're either at the beginning or the middle or the end. And I think a lot of farmers, in my experience, that are in the middle, that are gung-ho farming and busy every day, are basically, I suppose, not maybe thinking about the next generation at that stage, you know, and developing an interest in their children, if they have children in that, you know.
Thanks, Tom. And Neil, I mean, obviously you're I presume you're probably on maybe that succession spectrum somewhere. And I know that as well as working with Declan, you've also done a lot of training and mentoring of farm apprentices over the year. Yeah. So would you have any views on that sort of trajectory, that succession plan?
Yeah, I suppose going back, my father started taking apprentices back in 1976, I think it was. And I think we've over 40 to 50 students put through now at this stage. We've had diverse fellas. We've had people from Harold Cross in Dublin as apprentices and are still farm managers today. We've fellas that came off of herds of cows way bigger than our own that are not farming now. Mm-hmm. There's an awful lot of it, I suppose, got to do with, do you like it? Mm-hmm. It really is about liking the job. I suppose from where I kind of come from is where I'm a fifth generation, and we're talking about succession. My great grandfather will say bought the farm originally, and every generation has bought a piece of land, as we'll say, to make it a bit bigger. But it stepped out in, it was my granduncle that gave it to my father, because there was no next person there didn't actually want it like that. So it went to my father, down to me. I'm assuming I have 3 lads and a daughter, so someone of them will probably go farming at some stage. Yeah, I suppose the whole succession thing, what I'd say about it is, don't come home, or I suppose from a farmer's point of view, don't be expecting your son to come home and give him a $5 at the weekend and hope that when I'm sick and bored of it and he's 40, I'll give him the farm. Yeah. Pay him as you'd pay an employee. If he doesn't stick around, or if he does stick around, then sure, what about it? Sure, look, the money's going to be reinvested into the farm if he still has it. If he doesn't, and after blowing it, sure, look, it was going to be probably blown anyway. Yeah. You know? And if he wants to go off out the door and he has the money, sure, he lost no earnings anyway by staying at home.
Yeah, and he's giving it a good lash.
Give it a go, Lash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's a little bit similar to the entrepreneurship conversation this morning, which is about having the why you're doing it. Don't just do it on a whim. Don't just do it on as a hobby. If you're going into that, you're pretty committed. And this is about people, maybe as both of you are saying, from a younger age, getting the taste of a broad range of farming.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they can come to the conclusion about, as you said, do they like it? Is it
Yeah.
for them?
I see it at home. Like I can remember Declan when he was filling out, say, farms. What course? What am I supposed to do? I have the same now with a daughter at the moment. She has no clue what she wants to do. But what I'd say is, go with what you like at the time. I know loads of people that have changed courses after 2 years, or even maybe after a month going into college. And then you just have more people that even after qualifying with a degree goes away and does a totally different job altogether. So I'd say go with what you actually like at the time. And if you like farming, whether you're from a farm or not from a farm, you could be like all carpenters, their fathers weren't carpenters. You know, and the same with farming, only we have to get over that mentality of that, oh, you have to be off a farm to be a farmer. Like, you don't.
Yeah.
You know, and like that lad that came from Harold's Cross, that was about 15 years ago, and he's done Curran now, and he's managing a farm. Delighted.
Yeah. And do you think that there are still farmers who are, as you say, middle-aged or more senior age that haven't possibly integrated their family members or some of their family members? That they may well be working on the farm, but they're not broadening their scope and horizon as the decades go by, so that succession becomes an easier, more logical transfer, rather than almost a big point in time almost, if that makes sense.
Ideally, it would be, I suppose, when I took over, I went out my own farming first, and as I'll say, I was the eldest, just saying there was younger ones at home to get put through college and stuff. So I actually went out on my own and worked at home in the farm. And as we'll say, I got married in 99, and in 2002, a piece of land came up next to us. We merged the whole lot together then as one. And what I would say is Caroline, who I'm married to, she would be into finance and all that kind of stuff. She's an HR person. And it was brilliant because she was able to see after one side, I was able to see after the other side. And like we're talking about people going in together and stuff like that and following, if they actually can see the two different sides of things.
As a team.
So, yeah, and I'd hope, like with Declan there now as well, that, as we'll say, I'd be very hands-on doing physical work, we'll say, around the farm. But like, I can see that he's way more technical than I would be. Like that, and hopefully that would work together.
Okay.
His
So you're
technicality
balancing,
side, but and
skill sets.
skill sets,
Yeah.
big thing.
And as more of the, maybe some of the AgriTech examples we heard about this morning, as they're coming on stream, I'm not putting people into silos, but it might be that a younger person may embrace that and run with that quickly, introduce it to the farm. The existing farmer then sees the benefits of that, and there's a combined approach to that.
Yeah, just like it. I see definitely with the skill set of farming now at the moment, like I was saying to Tom a while ago, you'd nearly want somebody to filter the amount of information that's out there at the moment. We'll take the Teagasc signposts stuff. You do nothing else if you had to watch them. You get nothing done. You know, you'd nearly want somebody filtering that now at this stage, the amount of information that's out there, and for you to get the right stuff, like, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So maybe just bringing in the younger members of the panel now. I'm just in light of what we've been saying, and also what we heard a little bit this morning about one of the comments was around about the perception of the farming industry. I think the phrase the demonization of the farming industry, which is going on a bit in the media, a lot in the media sometimes. Maybe Amy might kick us off. You're not from a farming background. I think your parents maybe grew up on farms, but you're not from a farming background yourself.
Yeah.
How I'm interested to know how the both of you, how do you view farming? How do you view the industry? What's the perception that you have of it, and why are you interested in it?
So I suppose I was born in America and then moved to Kerry when I was 7. So apologies for the accent, but like I was kind of dropped into the middle of Kerry, far into sheep country as you can possibly get with push a Curran tool. So like I grew up around farms and I saw the family aspect of it, and I saw that kind of side of it. The technical kind of side of it didn't really come into it at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was just you know, everyone had a farm and everyone helped out. And it was really nice to see from an outsider's perspective, that side of it. So then when it came time to pick courses for college and things, as Neil said, you pick something that you like. So everyone thought I was a bit mad going doing ag science in college with no background in it, like, but it was what I was interested in. And I've taken that and I've really found a passion in it. So I suppose like the sector as a whole is really, really interesting, but it's to encourage people to get into it. Do you know, like the perception of it that it's slave labor basically for all young people, and then whoever gets lucky enough to get the farm gets it and all the other people are left to the side, that sort of thing. Like that can't continue. Like it has to change, it has to adapt, because I mean the options for young people now are limitless. Like you can go and do anything. So if farming isn't presented as an attractive option, nobody's going to do it. So I suppose I think
that's fascinating. So you and Declan, I don't know what your thoughts are, but do you feel that there's a potential barrier there currently in terms of how people who may not necessarily be from a farm background, but have maybe some interest or even don't know they've got an interest, but the perception of the industry or the sector, as you said, is that something that's maybe just prevented some people getting in at the first base? Even they're not putting it on their radar. I mean, Declan, obviously you've grown up in a farming background, but what would your thoughts be on that? I mean, maybe amongst some of your friends and your group of people.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I suppose I went on placement there even just this year, and there it's an equity partnership between two lads that went to college. They're milking 1,100 cows on 6 platforms, and like they came from owning no land themselves, and to build that over, I don't know, is it 7 years they're going now? You know, that's something incredible, and like to not actually have ownership of a farm.
Yeah.
And maybe more of those stories need to be shown, the success stories, to show that it can be done without owning a farm, or you know.
So do you think, I mean, I suppose like any industry or a business or a brand, I'm a marketeer by trade myself. Do you think, is there for want of a better expression, maybe an image problem here that's preventing some people taking that step in? When actually, as you just said, Amy, and yourself, there's a whole myriad of different opportunities and avenues that are opening up within the sector. But is that message getting out? It's a good point you said. Are we telling enough of the good stories, the good news stories? Are they being swamped by a lot of the bad news stories we're hearing all the time?
Yeah, I guess, and a lot of that can come from media, I suppose. But I suppose as a farmer, you just kind of put the head on and plug on. But maybe is it the right thing to do? I don't know. I suppose, and you were saying about the different avenues. Like I suppose that was a massive thing going into the course that I'm doing now. Is that like just start with the highest option you can and go from there. Like I suppose, look, I'm looking at going farming, but the different options are massive. Like you know. And that is something within the agricultural industry that not many other industries can get. Like, you know, if you become an engineer, you're an engineer. Whereas, you know, like you can be a milk advisor, there's so many different avenues you can go down. And possibly that's not shown.
Coming out enough.
Yeah,
so that could be an action to take out of this conversation today. And Tom, I mean, Declan mentioned there people he knows that are managing farms and not necessarily come from a land asset transfer background, etc. So are there different types of farming models that do exist or could exist that could be beneficial to bring in more young people into the industry?
Yes, so I suppose looking in the last maybe 20 years, if you like, maybe Declan mentioned, you know, the equity partnerships, but I suppose I worked previously in the whole area of farm partnerships, if you like, but there's also share farming as well. And since quotas were removed in the dairy sector in 2015, that has come in. There's a really good example in Gortine, and the 4 West Cork co-ops own that farm and set up a share farming arrangement where there's between 80 and 100 cows being milked there the young farmer that's farming there doesn't own that farm but is making a living off it. And I suppose while I mentioned earlier the age group being where it is, like with every obstacle there's an opportunity, and I think opportunities will come for young people to get into farming if as Neil says, if that's what they want to do and if they like to do it. Because I suppose around 2015 the Land Mobility Service was set up by MACRA, and I suppose one of the things that came out of that earlier, I think when they started it, they thought they would have floods of young farmers looking to get into farming, and land access was the issue. But actually they found the opposite, which kind of ties in with the age group, that a lot of older farmers are there. The issue is around maybe viability and the enterprise on the farm and how viable it is, and can that business sustain two incomes, if you like, the landowners and the share farmers, if you like. Or so I suppose for me, there is steps in it that there are farmers out there and people looking for opportunities, maybe from the level 7 farm management or whatever, but they'd go maybe and work in that farm for a period of time and see, can the two people actually get on and do business together and have common goals, and maybe that might progress then to a partnership or a share farming arrangement. Land leasing, I think, is there, and the land leasing was beneficial in one way in terms of making land available longer term, so people could make good business decisions around it. But for a young person starting out, maybe with maybe a small amount of capital or whatever, and just with the structure around scheme payments and things like that, land leasing is a big. Generally, it's farmers, maybe established farmers that are benefiting from the land leasing, but also giving opportunities to young people who want to get involved in farming those units. So I think there is opportunities there, and the key thing, like any business, if somebody really wants to do it, the opportunities are there if you seek them. They'll
find a way. Again, a bit like this morning, we talked about searching for the information, speaking to people, putting yourself out there. And I mean, Neil, I don't know if you've got anything. Are there enough of those opportunities? There's sort of share farm possibilities. I mean, are they becoming more available or more common, or is it quite a low level amount of those opportunities?
I think there's a relatively low level amount. Certainly, I remember speaking to Austin Finn, and maybe you have to be willing to travel to the opportunity, and you have to be willing to commit to the opportunity. It may not, if you're based here in Skibbereen, you mightn't get 1-2 miles out the road. You might have to travel to East Cork or Tipperary or somewhere. But again, if it's something you want to do and the opportunity is there, you might have to make that move, if that's something you really want.
Yeah, which is what people have to do in other careers as well. Yeah. What about this whole topic, which I know gets a lot of discussion and is very important, around the kind of the life work balance of farming? And again, maybe it's had a bad rap in the past, but I know from just chairing the judging panel on the farming awards, particularly amongst the younger farmers, I have to say, who we interviewed, it came out consistently amongst the younger farmers that this was something they were taking very seriously and trying to build into their farming lifestyle, shall we say. Neil, someone who's been doing it for a good few years, what's your thoughts on that? And is that something that or is it a little bit of a pipe dream? Or
no, it's not a pipe dream. I'd be the worst one to say it. I didn't go on holidays for the last 9 years. Okay, right? Just stop. I'd be the worst in the world about it. But what I used to do, I was first involved with underage football, G and that, and like that. I had a full-time worker at the time, which allowed me to have that time, as we'll say, to go training, go to matches and whatever in the evening. I got very used to it, very, very used to it altogether. And then like that, the chap that was working with us, he was there for, was it 11 years, I think, and he was from Hungary, and he decided to go home. And I was thrown into the deep end, as good as thrown back into the deep end again, and my whole life just basically stopped. As we'll say, training stopped, all this work had to be put in. But I think a lot of it is the finishing time. If you had to, if mornings don't really, you're not going to be meeting up with a whole lot of people in the mornings, but if you can be finished in the evening so that you can go football training or go wherever, whatever the story is, then I'd say the key thing is finishing time in the evenings. So we've fierce tendency in farming to keep working in the evening, especially if there's daylight there.
Because the work is there.
The work is there, but if you can turn on the milking machine early enough so as to be finished early enough, then I'd say, yeah, you'll get away with it. No, it's just a kind of a. I'm the worst. I like this
Yeah.
now to advise in this thing. It's like,
But at least you're being honest and you're putting the
Yeah,
message out
yeah,
there, because it sounds to me that that's something, an ingredient that would feed back into what we were talking earlier, guys, about the perception of farming and trying to attract people into it. That if that was more of an accepted, I think one of you mentioned the slave labor term, and I think Declan, you may have mentioned that when we interviewed you for the Southern Star, and so it's obviously something that's very important to you, and you are aware of that feeling that the work-life balance may not have been there in past generations, but it's important to your generation. Would that be, Amy? Would that be correct with yourself?
Yeah, I suppose, like, going back to the point that, like, the amount of jobs out there are limitless now. Like, work-life balance is a thing in every other job. Why shouldn't it be in this sector? Do you know? So if you can get it, you take it. Like, and I suppose, like, that whole thing of gradual and constant thing into succession, like, that should help the work-life balance. Is if everyone's helping out, then the work can be shared out within reason. You know. But,
Yes. And Declan, you're hoping to head off to the other side of the world soon, are you, to get down to New Zealand?
Yeah,
that
that's
right?
the plan.
Yeah.
We'll get the final year of college done first, and
yeah. Sorry, yeah, good point.
after that, then hopefully we'll get over. Yeah, there would have been an opportunity through the college to go, only COVID stopped that. But look, that's life, and we'll get through that. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And they work you hard down there? Work-life balance down there?
Sorry?
What's the work-life balance down there? Like, will they work you hard down there? I'm sure they will.
Oh, I'm sure they will. But look, I think maybe they're probably a step ahead of us, and we say structured rosters and things like that, and something that might be something that should probably come into farms more. I suppose back when I was in school and stuff, because we had a full-time worker at home, I would have had a lot of opportunity to work outside the farm, and I would have worked on other farms, and I worked in construction for a few summers as well. And that thing of knowing that you're kind of set to go home at this time, it's you can make training, and I know obviously things go wrong, but in large, that kind of has to come into farming too, that this is the time we go milking, and obviously things can go wrong, but
they can. I wish I could tell my newspaper printers that I had a phone call at 12:30 last night with the printing. But yeah, I agree with you. Things do, and it can never be perfect, but it's at least having that structure can be a very positive thing, can't it? Great. I'd like us to think about diversification now. Just turn our thoughts to that, both in terms of the benefits of diversification to farming generally, in terms of viability, but again with one eye on how that could present another opportunity to attract the younger generation into the industry, into the sector, because it maybe gives a broadened approach to viability of the farm and farming. We have some great examples in West Cork, as we all know, people like the Olshires and Ross Carbery and West Cork Eggs and Skegnor Duck, etc., etc. The list goes on. Tom, I know you're quite a passionate advocate of looking at diversified and alternative revenue streams for farmers where appropriate.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on that?
I suppose just one comment on the last discussion was I've never yet met a dairy farmer didn't regret putting in a better milking parlour, and technology, tying this into this morning's session, technologies can do an awful lot to improve work-life balance in farming in general, and farmers are good adopters of technology. I suppose look, diversification, I suppose dairying is very buoyant, and if it's done anyway reasonably well technically, especially with milk prices this year, it's viable. But I suppose a concept I'd like to focus on is the household income. So, if you take a family in West Cork and, what are the sources of income coming to that house that allowed that family to live and as normal and do their business in their region and contribute to the community, which farmers in West Cork to me are the lifeblood of community in West Cork, and towns like Skibbereen depend on the farming hinterland. And look, I'd be very passionate about that. But I suppose, diversification, we're on the Wild Atlantic Way here, and as you said, there are a lot of examples of long established farms that have diversified in West Cork with meat products and food products and tourism businesses. And it's the development of those, and it goes back to the discussion this morning, and Kevin mentioned our options course, and we often get farmers in that consider, you know, have an idea, maybe they have a natural resource on their farm that they don't realize they have, or you know, they could, there's a, you know, a number of farmers have started glamping parks and various things, or walkways and things like that. But how do you turn that? It's no different to a piece of technology. How do you turn that into a business that you know, can contribute to that household income, and that's where Kevin and Leo and people like that can really help farmers to develop those, you know. But there are really good examples around, you know, West Cork eggs, Caroline, you know, I suppose with Bath dairy farming in Caroline producing eggs, those kind of examples. But that makes that farm more viable, and where it comes in, I suppose, is that you know, there are where viable. I think my mic is in and out a small bit, but where, you know, the enterprise is not delivering an income where it can sustain the parents through into their retirement and another generation coming on behind them. So that's really where a good diversification and model of diversification that like is, I suppose, from a business point of view, is sound, that could actually and also to utilize one thing we didn't discuss was the skills and the abilities and the enthusiasm that we've heard all day up front that youth bring in. And I'd be a strong believer that if you don't create a situation where, whether it is farming in a mainstream enterprise or whether it's a diversification, that you can use those skills and those abilities in the business to the benefit of everybody. And like us all, if you learn a new skill or you have a skill or an ability and you don't get to use it, you don't belong forgetting it. Like, so I think it's really important to take advantage of that.
Great, thanks. Neil, would you introduce any diversification strategies within your own farming setup, or any of your sort of farming counterparts that you are aware of locally at all?
Not a whole pile, but like that, I suppose, is kind of you know, earlier we were saying about you know, the kind of the age structure and stuff about taking on farms and all this kind of stuff and getting into agriculture. Possibly diverse, like some block of land might be given to you, mightn't be, you couldn't make a full-time earning off it or something like that, and that you need some sideline with it. And sometimes it could be a hindrance to actually have that piece of land. It might have been better off that you didn't get it, that you might go away and lease a block of land viable. But if you were staying at home with a small parcel of land or something, that you could diversify into some niche market to help out. We'll say, I know that in my kind of thing is that, you know, there's certain jobs like maybe doing a bit of spot spraying or something along them kind of lines, like that, fencing or something like that, that you could specialize in it. That it might only be for 4 or 5 hours a day or something like that, and to go along with your farming at home, like that. I think there's a big demand for that kind of work. An awful lot, because right, I might only look for it for maybe 2 or 3 times in a year. But like, if all the farmers knew that there was a certain element, or there was a certain person out there that was able to do this work, specialize in this kind of stuff, then there's, I know for a fact that probably in our discussion group, that the majority would go for that type of person to get that little job done. No, and it might just work in with their piece of ground, and it mightn't cost a whole pile of money to get into. That type of work. And then it just gives you another string to your bow as well. Go forward. Another income stream coming in. And Declan and Amy, any particular examples of diversified businesses or ventures that you've seen on farms, or that you've been involved with, or that you've even had a bit of an idea about yourself at this stage?
I suppose looking over COVID, sure, I suppose that nearly everyone in the room was probably watching Clarkson's Farm, and that's something that's massive over in England, kind of a farm shop, and maybe it's something that could be looked into, maybe not even within just the one farm, but if this farm was producing milk and another farm was producing beef or something, and you know, there's a load of different things that they all came together and created local produce, and you know, that they were able to get a premium price for that. Then again,
so have a breadth of product range by bringing different suppliers together.
I think there's definitely a space for that in West Cork, especially within the tourism industry and everything. Yeah.
Utilising the Westport brand
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well as the local produce.
Yeah.
Interesting. And Amy, you're thinking more about possibly a career down in the milk quality route, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I suppose like when I'm not from a farm and realistically won't maybe have the opportunity to get one, it would be much more difficult with capital and that sort of thing to go about it. I suppose the agribusiness side of it would be more where I'd be heading, you know. But like the opportunities there are huge, you know, and it kind of goes both ways. Agribusiness doesn't exist without this, you know.
Absolutely.
So like if young people aren't getting into farming, there's no need for any of the rest of us either that fill up those other jobs. So they kind of go hand in hand, I think.
Yeah.
But no, I think the diversification thing is going to be massive for the reputation of Irish agriculture. You know, if you have these farms that have these other streams of income coming in that are getting into the community and are bringing in tourism and that sort of thing, it all helps the image of agriculture. You know, if people from all around the world can come and stay on these farms, or people from other parts of Ireland, from cities and whatever, can come and see the reality of what people are doing every day and the work that they're getting done and the effort that goes into putting that product on the table in front of you like that. I think it'll help bring maybe two opposite sides.
There's a
of
synergy
the-
there with the local population and the tourists coming in. Things
Yeah.
like West Cork farm tours,
Yeah.
which I think were going really well for a while. And I'm even thinking about the winner of the Diversification Award in the Farming Awards this year, Goat's Path Pods down on the Sheep's Head Way. Another example of where he's going to draw people in basically to see that part of the world and to see his farm as well.
Yeah, like I think, you know, when people don't, like I know myself, like before I went doing my course in college, like I didn't understand dairy farming at all. Like I didn't get the work that goes into it. I didn't get the effort. I didn't get the passion and that the love that goes into it. You just saw people making loads and loads of money, and you thought that. But no, that's, you know, is that like you didn't see the passion that goes into it. Like you just, I suppose, the outsider perspective, you see animals being used
Yes.
and people making money off of it.
Yes.
Whereas when you see it in front of you and you realize the work that goes into
Yeah.
it, you have a much bigger appreciation for it, and you're a lot more understanding of why they fight so hard for it. And I think, you know, the other side of the coin, people that would be against agriculture, if they could see why people do it for reasons other than money, the lifestyle and stuff, like I think it would be
Exactly.
massively helpful.
Yeah, good point. Well said. Yeah,
Mm.
thank you. Okay, the last sort of topic we just wanted to touch on was just really coming back to this difference between constant and gradual succession planning and possibly the mistake that some people make sometimes where they confuse that or mix that up with inheritance and the point of sort of asset transfer, land transfer, etc. And I know, Tom, I think you got a couple of thoughts around that in terms of useful or practical advice for farmers who may be at that point, in terms of the advice and the key actors that they should be thinking about bringing to help them with that process.
Yeah, so I suppose, look, succession is everything that happens before the farm transfer. So inheritance is legal transfer, so it involves tax and it involves your solicitor, obviously to effect the transfer. But the succession is defined as the gradual transfer of management and decision making, you know, up to that point. So that's going back to what I was saying earlier about when do people get involved in farming and gain an interest in it. And that's what succession is about, where the final step of that is maybe making key financial decisions, investments, and so on in the business. Is sort of the latter stage of it. But the inheritance, I think it's really important. People build up this sometimes to be something it's not. I suppose in Ireland, we're quite unique. We have a very generous tax system to effect transfer from one generation to the next. The envy of a lot of Europe, if you look at right across Europe, France, you know, Germany, Switzerland, you look into the Netherlands, essentially the younger generation have to buy out their parents to become involved in farming. So they're saddled with high levels of debt. And that's a big stumbling block in those countries with farm transfer going forward. But here, You have essentially three taxes. You have the older generation that are concerned about capital gains tax, and you have stamp duty and capital acquisitions tax. And there's been very generous reliefs around that. So the first bit of advice in terms of inheritance is, you know, I suppose we could ask anyone here in the room, how many people in the room here have made a will? If we ask for a show of hands, yeah, about 50%, and that's usually the figure. So I suppose the question is asked, when should you make a will? Well, as soon as you buy your first house, as soon as you own assets, you should make a will, because if you don't make a will, then the state decides where your assets go if you die. And we all think we'll never die, maybe, and you know, and a bit like it'll happen to someone else, but it won't happen to me. But there's so many people that die with no will, and it creates havoc. So that's the first step. That's your solicitor. It costs about 200 or 300 euros to make a will or thereabouts. If you don't do that, you leave a lot of money in a solicitor's pocket then, and you could fall out with all your family members as well, fighting over, you know, the shares that have to be divvied out. So, like you know, go to your solicitor and make a will is a simple bit of advice. I suppose in terms of the ideal scenario for a farm transfer is if you could actually get your solicitor and your accountant and your agricultural advisor into the room at the same time and say, so your agricultural advisor is going to advise you around herd numbers and scheme related issues around farm transfer and stuff like that to do with the EU cap schemes. Your solicitor is going to give you legal advice on how you actually transfer it and in what way you do it, and your accountant will look after the capital and the gift tax side of it. But if you could get them talking, I suppose, look, very quickly, I've come across situations maybe where a farm has been left, you know, in tenants in common or joint tenants between two brothers, and there are long-term tax implications for trying to divide that situation out. So that's why, you know, if a solicitor proposes one sort of structure for transfer, it's good to have the accountant there to say, well, hold on a second here now, if we look 20 years down the road here, we could be creating an issue with tax. So that's something we're very anxious in Teagasc to promote, and in discussions with the Department of Agriculture about how we could make that happen more often, because obviously the solicitor and the accountants are professionals and they have to be paid for their time, but you know, that's a really important consideration.
Okay, thank you. I think we're probably at the point where we might see if there's any questions from the floor or from the online audience at all. Well, no, we haven't got the online audience over there. They departed at lunchtime. So any questions from the floor at all? We have one here.
My name is Jerome O'Mahony. I'm a dairy farmer based in the Premier League. First of all, congratulations. I know it's great to see an AgriTech conference. I've been attending a lot more over the years. It's just a pity doesn't know. I think all the farmers know each other here. So I know, is that a good sign or bad sign? You know, I think there should be more farmers come to this. You know, and it's great to see, you know, diversity of speakers. And you know, when I think sometimes people forget, you know, commercial agriculture is very important. You know, we talk about diversification. I think diversification is very super where appropriate, but sometimes I think Nick hit a chord with us about the farming sentiment out there, not, you know, that we're under attack, and just give it some local flavor to here. I see Drina Co-op is sponsoring with AIB here and for local, it's HCO local co-op. And for people that don't know Drina Co-op, that stretches from Castletown Bay over to Rossmore to Union Hall. It's kind of a coastal, you could say, a lot of the Wild Atlantic way. But you know, commercial agriculture is so important for West Cork because we're just doing some calculations at the tea break there. Tom had alluded to a milk price boom this year, and if we put that into financial figures, for basically in Drina Co-op area, there's about 540 dairy farmers. Just for every cent rise or drop in milk price, that equates to 2 million in the local economy. This year, thankfully, milk price gone up roughly about 20 cents. That's 40 million in the local area. And if we put that to industrial wages, that's 1,000 job factory in 3 towns. So, you know, let's not forget, you know, that commercial agriculture is a very important for rural Ireland. and we should be mindful of that. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yep. I mean, I can concur with that from my perspective of running a local media, local newspaper business. We often can see the ebb and the flow of the prices and how the farmers are doing, basically, and not immediately, but we can often see that how that will trickle through into local advertising, because where's the local advertising coming from? It's coming from local retailers. What are local retailers doing? They're spending money if and when they are bringing in income through the door as well. Where does a lot of that income through the door come from? It comes from the agricultural and the farming communities. So you're absolutely right. It's intrinsically linked to the local economies of a place like West Cork. So yeah, I think it's a good point. Thank you. Any more questions for any of the panel? Okay. I think we might be there then. So listen, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience, but thank you particularly now to our panel. Thank you to Amy. Thank you to Declan. Thank you to Neil. Thank you to Tom. Thanks for coming down and giving us your time today and your insights and your views. It's fascinating to get real life views from real life farmers and people studying agriculture, and Tom with his wealth of experience as well from Teagasc. So big round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thanks, John.